Alrighty, so before we actually get into what we're going to talk about, let me warn you just right off the bat, this is probably going to be a longer video. I want to get into the nitty-gritty details of this. I think I should fully explain myself to the last detail. I don't care how long it takes. I'll sit here for 3 hours. I made a coffee just because. Not feeling the greatest. Hopefully it's not the Rona. But we're going to get through this. So without further ado, I have zero doubt in my mind that Baker Mayfield is the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. So let me explain myself, because I know there's going to be a lot of people who will click on this video for comedy purposes because they think I'm an idiot, don't know what I'm talking about, and just speak from, what I think and not actually what I feel. Okay, so where to start? Baker Mayfield this past season, and I want to preface this by saying before I actually recorded this video, I went through because I've already gone through the rookie season many times and this past season many times, but I went back through the highlights, the lowlights, the good and the bad, the ugly of this past season, and, kind of compared with the rookie year of Baker and just kind of compare and contrast and try to make sure that what I believe is truly the truth. And basically, what I seen from this past season was a lot of issues. And these issues don't directly tie Baker to the one at fault. So, where to start? So the Browns drafted Baker Mayfield, number 1 overall. I believe it was the 2018 NFL draft. And this was a little bit of a risky pick, a ballsy pick by John Dorsey because, Baker at his size, 6'1", coming from the Big 12, a lot of questions on how he would fit passing against NFL defenses with his size and whatnot. So, a little bit of a risky pick, but thank God John Dorsey made that pick. So in Baker's rookie year, he did not start, or he did not get on the field until week 3 against the New York Jets in Cleveland on Thursday Night Football. And if you remember anything from that game, it was absolutely horrible, no momentum, no energy, terrible game from the Browns. And Tyrod Taylor goes down, concussion, in comes the number 1 overall pick. Baker stepped in, absolutely re-energized, electrified, a stadium, a city, a fan base. A star was born on that Thursday Night Football game. So, going forward from there, did Baker just, 24/7? No. But what you've seen from Baker Mayfield is he can make NFL passes. And, that sounds ridiculous, but like I said, there was a big concern coming from a Big 12 team in Oklahoma. How's he going to be able to adjust? He adjusted fine. He broke the rookie passing touchdown record held by both Peyton Manning and Russell Wilson, now owned by Baker Mayfield. So, keep that in mind. He didn't play a full 3 games and still broke that record. By playing a full, I mean starting. So, Baker throughout his rookie year had flashes of greatness, played very consistent, and even though there was a lot of tough losses, some tough games, you could tell there was a lot going on there. It was special. This kid is a special player. And the one thing I love about Baker Mayfield is, and it's similar with all the Oklahoma quarterbacks, he has, like Skip Bayless says, an absolute whip of an arm. This sounds ridiculous to say, but if there was one word to describe Baker Mayfield as a thrower, it would be zip. Zip. Because when he throws it, it's tight, it's hard, it's fast. And it's unique. It's very unique. I haven't seen a quarterback in a long time who throws like him. And if there's any comparisons as far as the passing style, I think, Brett Favre draws some comparisons. But I think Baker is very unique because of his passing style. There's a lot of quarterbacks who are drop back in the pocket, float one deep, can throw it a mile, but they're either not super accurate or it's just kind of a duck. And Baker's not that. Baker's going to be very quick, very precise, accurate, and fast ball. I watched a video on Instagram, I think it was like a Madden commercial, where Baker was throwing to some dude. It wasn't a receiver, it was just some guy who I think worked for EA, and he had like a body cam right here, and that ball was like super smooth, super like the spiral was perfect, and it was fast. It was like a bullet coming at him. And yes, I know all quarterbacks can throw hard and quick, and you're an NFL quarterback, but I'm saying he's got a zip in his throw. It's like I said, Skip Bayless says he's got a whip of an arm that's absolutely, completely accurate. Now, one thing Skip Bayless said, and he's an Oklahoma Sooners fan, so he's watched a lot of Baker Mayfield. He said he's a careful gambler. He'll throw it into tight spaces, but he's very careful in his decision-making. In this past season, Freddie Kitchens was given the head coaching job. He was given the head coaching job because Baker Mayfield pretty much picked him to be the guy. And in hindsight, yes, that was a terrible decision for the Browns to just say, hey, pick your coach. But Baker at the time was looked at by the organization as the next superstar in the NFL. I mean, there was that commercial in the Super Bowl where Brady's handing off either the football or his rings to Baker, and people were looking at that as like a passing of the torch. It wasn't Lamar, it wasn't Patrick Mahomes. He gave that to Baker. Like, that's how people looked at Baker before this past season. Now, getting off of the rookie year, because I think everybody's seen or has seen the successes of what he had. And there was a lot of expectations going into the next season. In last year's season, we talked about why Freddie Kitchens was hired, but there's a reason why everybody expected this offense to roll like it would. Number one, the receiving core. Baker last year, or not last season, but the season before, was throwing to a lot of guys who you had no clue who they were. A lot of people really didn't know who Rashard Higgins was, Damian Ratley, Brashard Perriman. I'm trying to think who else. I can't remember. I see him, but I can't remember his name. Anyway, so moving on into this season, you bring in Odell Beckham Jr., pair him with Jarvis Landry, his friend. He still had that connection with Rashard Higgins, and kept some of the guys that Baker was very solid with the year before. So everybody was like, okay, we got this superstar, young, elite quarterback, bring in one of the best receivers in the league. ESPN had a list just come out, and he was fourth. Not that means a lot, but there's still a lot of belief in Odell Beckham Jr. Now, another reason was Nick Chubb. You've seen what Nick Chubb could be, had a lot of success, a lot of flashes. You bring in Kareem Hunt, even though he was not going to be able to play for the first 8 games. It's still Kareem Hunt. And the Freddie Kitchens factor was such a big deal and why he got the job, because he got the best out of Baker Mayfield. The back half of that rookie year, where Freddie was technically the offensive coordinator, Baker was absolutely rolling. Absolutely rolling. And now it's like, you look back on it, and it's not what you thought it was. And so it's kind of difficult, because evaluating from year to year, you got to look at the personnel, coaching, and Baker this past season had a horrible offensive line. Greg Robinson was terrible. Joe Bitonio, who is one of the better linemen on the team, one of the better team players on the team, I think underperformed. Treader was hurt a lot throughout the season. Right guard, you kind of experimented. You did trade for Wyatt Teller. I think he played very solid. I think he'll be the guy at right guard this season. And then at right tackle, you had Chris Hubbard. Chris Hubbard was not terrible. He wasn't as bad as Greg Robinson, but it was not good at all. It was still horrible. There was many times last season where Baker absolutely just got crushed because that offensive line couldn't block a fly. And it was embarrassing to watch. I mean, every single game, from game one with the Titans, Cameron Wake, game two, not so much with the Jets, but, when we played the Rams, Aaron Donald was just all over us, as he normally is with everybody. But my point is, the offensive line was absolute garbage. No matter what anybody wants to tell you, it was awful. And I will literally sit down and talk with anybody who wants to argue that the Browns' offensive line was not that bad. They were terrible. And so Baker did not trust his offensive line at all. He had a coach in Freddie Kitchens the year before who put him in the right position the majority of the time. The season Freddie was head coach, he did not do that. He completely scrapped everything that was successful the year before. He went from a get the ball out quick, got a lot of checkdowns, a lot of options that helps Baker, to a air raid. Let's have everybody go 40 yards downfield so our quarterback can get murdered. And you've seen that consistently throughout the season. And I went back and watched the Ravens game, which was game 4. It was more of a play action, get the ball out quick, and Baker was not terrible. Because that's what his skill set is. He can make the big throws, but when he's at his best is the quick, get that ball out, like I said, zip, off the play action. And Freddie completely abandoned everything that got him the job. And I don't understand it, but that's what he did. And, we're going to have to live with that. But Baker did not live up to expectations. But my thing last year, why he failed, was coaching was awful. Beyond awful. Like awful. Like running the ball up the middle on 4th and 9, 4th and 12, whatever it was. The continuous stupid screens or gimmick plays, the 40 yards downfield to every receiver, it was horrible. It was really a joke. There's people who do not like the Browns, who hate Baker Mayfield, that was even saying, yeah, Freddie's terrible. He should have never got the job. And I really do feel bad for him. I was so happy the day he got fired. I kind of felt sad watching the video of him leaving, with the helmet, just because, from a man-to-man standpoint, I hate to see you lose your job, but especially a guy like him who kind of worked his way up. But that's not the point. The point is he refused to give up play calling. He refused to go back to what worked. And this team was a very young team. And you dealt with adversity throughout the season on both sides of the ball. Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry played hurt all year. Beckham more than they both had surgery, but then you had David Njoku break his wrist. I believe he broke his wrist in week 2. Kareem Hunt was still suspended for half the season. And you combine all that with the expectations. And when you don't see this offense that's just marching up and down the field on everybody, you go on First Take and they're talking about it. And it really weighed on this team greatly. Like, you could literally see it game in and game out. And I go back to, after that Ravens game, there was a lot of hope because it was like, okay, this looks right. Even though, the tight ends he was throwing to was Steven Carlson, Ricky Seals-Jones, guys like that. I'm trying to remember the one guy. I can't remember his name. I really liked him a lot. What's his name? Not that it matters, but my point is it was tight ends that were not deemed to be, your star or your starting tight ends. It was the lower guys who are lucky to make the roster. So when you seen the success in a game like that Baltimore game, it was like, okay, here we go. And then what happened? You get absolutely destroyed by the 49ers. The Seahawks game we fought through, but so many coaching errors. If Freddie Kitchens did not make a few stupid calls, we would probably have 3-4 more wins. He'd probably still have his job. It was an embarrassment. It was a terrible, terrible season from a coaching standpoint. It was awful. And Freddie Kitchens should have never got the job. So I do feel bad for him, but at the same point, you could have easily given up your play calling duties, and who knows what would have happened. You're looking at your coordinators. Now that we've heard your coordinators were coming out, going to other teams and basically saying this is a complete dumpster fire. Because Freddie's got no clue what he's doing. He's benching guys like Rashard Higgins, who had success with Baker the year before. You're not running the ball as much as you should. And when you're passing the ball, it's terrible plays. It's gimmicky crap. It's the same 4 plays over and over and over. And after a while, it's like, what is this? It was a complete joke. I've seen college offenses in Division II schools run better offenses. And despite the terrible offensive line play, you can scheme around it. We schemed the opposite. We schemed the worst way with a bad line. So is all the struggles on Baker? No, he certainly deserves his blame. Because I think he checked out mentally. I don't think he was physically in shape, mentally in shape, and you could definitely tell. And there was good and bad. You got to take the positives in every situation. So in the highlights from last season, one thing I noticed were a lot of the success was off of play action. Despite Baker Mayfield's below average year, not a good year at all, he still he finished third in play action touchdowns off of play action. So who was first? Kirk Cousins. This will tie in to next season. So, fast forward, everything just derails, and I personally believe Baker played hurt, or he was definitely severely beat up, because he took a lot of shots. And I personally don't believe there's many quarterbacks who would have succeeded in that system with that offensive line. But, so fast forward, it all derails. Freddie Kitchens is fired. Basically, the entire coaching staff is fired. Kevin Stefanski is hired as the new head coach of the Cleveland Browns. And at the time, I was very, 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 very upset because I wanted Josh McDaniels. And I talked about this on the podcast, and I think Josh McDaniels will still be a good head coach if he gets another chance. I personally wanted McDaniels because I think from a culture standpoint, he knows from being in New England what it's like and how to set a culture. And number two, he liked Baker Mayfield coming out of college, and I think he would have worked with him well. So I really wanted Josh McDaniels. And when I found out it was Kevin Stefanski, I was very disappointed. Like, very disappointed. In hindsight. And also, not just Freddie Kitchens gets fired, John Dorsey gets fired as well. And moving forward, Andrew Berry's hired as general manager, Kevin Stefanski as head coach, and it all makes sense now. Andrew Berry was hired because the Haslams know him, and he's a very well-respected front office personnel. He's been on a lot of different teams, a lot of well-respected, well-ran organizations. The Browns have always had front office issues. And Andrew Berry, to me, John Dorsey had too much ego. John Dorsey is great at building a team outside of offensive line, but he had a lot of ego there that was shocking to me. Same thing with Freddie Kitchens. Ego. Very much ego. And I don't think much anybody's seen that coming. But you look at it now and it's like, yeah, those two had to go. Those two had to go. Because John Dorsey wasn't going to have a head coach that, if we had success, he couldn't take credit for. That's why Freddie Kitchens was hired. He was a John Dorsey guy. And Kevin Stefanski is perfect to fit with Andrew Berry. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry are both very smart, very calculated, analytical, the scary word, and that's a joke with Browns fans, if you didn't get it. But these two are going to work hand in hand. The Cleveland Browns have not necessarily had a general manager and head coach that work hand in hand well in a long time. Now, Freddie and Dorsey did because Freddie was Dorsey's puppet. So now we look where we're at and prove it, okay? Andrew Berry, what are you going to do in this offseason to fix this mess? Well, let's start off, number one, a new decade. 2020, new decade, start fresh. New uniforms, new branding, back to the future with these new uniforms. They're back to the classic style, but they're just the right amount of new look to go with the classic style. You look good, you play good, I think. And I know a lot of people say, I don't care about uniforms, put the wins on the field. I agree. But I do think it's important to, when you have a set culture, a set style, you look at the Cowboys, the Packers, the 49ers, you have a style, you keep it. And the Browns are one of these brands that have a style. And in 2015, they threw it out the window. So them getting back to these classic style uniforms and the classic branding helps a lot, because I think it's going to take some attention off of what happened this past season. As stupid as that sounds, that's one thing I do believe is true. I think the new branding is going to help moving forward. So, we talked about that. So, as far as the offseason moves, free agency, you bring in Case Keenum. This will help Baker more than anything. Case Keenum worked in Kevin Stefanski's system. Case Keenum had very much success in Kevin Stefanski's system, like playoff success. Keenum is a pro. He's had his ups and downs. He knows what the NFL is. And he knows the system like the back of his hand. So Baker has nobody better, as far as backup options, to get him ready, teach him, help him, guide him how to be a pro. Case Keenum is the best option. And I know people will talk about Cam Newton, but Case Keenum is perfect because he can help the coaching side of bringing Baker back to what Baker is at his best. Alex Van Pelt, this is a guy who worked with Aaron Rodgers, worked down there in Cincinnati. I forget where else he was. But anyway, a lot of respect. He's focusing and determined on fixing Baker Mayfield from a fundamental standpoint. Footwork, accuracy. Baker's skill set was his accuracy, and he lost that last season. So Van Pelt is determined on fixing that, getting him back to what he is at his best. And I completely think he will succeed at trying to do that. So you combine that coaching with Case Keenum. So you got a guy who's going to come in, fix him fundamentally, get him back to performing his best. You got a guy behind him who's going to help him know the system, learn the system, be a leader, be a starting quarterback in the NFL. And then you have a head coach who is going to, with his offensive style, put Baker in the perfect position to succeed based on his skill sets. Quick passing, get the ball out, off of the play action, So that's the perfect scenario from a coaching standpoint there, because I'm looking at Case Keenum as a coach, not necessarily as a backup quarterback. If Baker gets injured, or God forbid he's terrible, which I don't think he will be, Keenum, I think, can get the job done. So, moving on. Offensive line. Jack Conklin, fix the right tackle. Jedrick Wills, fix the left tackle. And I know Jedrick Wills is going to have to make that switch. I have full confidence in him transitioning from right to left, strictly because everything I've heard from Joe Thomas, everything I've heard from scouts, he's technically sound. And even though he's not the biggest, he's not the strongest, he's great when it comes to controlling his man. And his footwork is second to none. I think he's the best all-around tackle in the draft. And I think he's a mauler. I think he's a beast. I think he's the best tackle in that draft. Andrew Thomas is the best passing tackle in that draft. I think you look at a guy like Mekhi Becton, who might have the most potential. Tristan Wirfs, a lot of potential. But as far as day one starter, get the best. Jedrick Wills is it. And this offensive style is going to require athletic tackles who will be able to buy time but yet be athletic enough to get out, get hands on a linebacker, a safety, and create that running lane. And I think we have the two best options that we could have had at those tackle positions, with Jedrick Wills being such an athletic freak, a mauler, and you got a guy in Jack Conklin who succeeds at his best in this system. You've seen it in Tennessee to an extent. So from the offensive line standpoint, you're going to have Joe Bitonio back, and I think with a good left tackle, that's going to take pressure off of him. And from the guard standpoint, Treader, if he can stay healthy, he's going to be good. Wyatt Teller, I've seen a lot of positives from him. There's going to be a competition there with Drew Forbes. Trying to think who else. We drafted Anthony Harris. No, wait a minute. No. What's his name? I can't remember his name. But anyway, the center out of Washington. And I think he could potentially compete for that right guard position. I wouldn't count him out. The offensive line went from garbage to, I believe, one of the best in football. I have full belief that this offensive line is going to be one of the best in football, and a lot of that has to do with the style. I think, you can have the best players in the world, but if they don't fit a certain scheme, you're going to have issues. That brings me to the wide receiver room. Odell Beckham Jr. is healthy now, had his surgery. He's going to be completely healthy. He's bigger. He's stronger. If you look at him, he looks a lot bigger. I think, he's had a lot of injury issues throughout his career. I think he's going to be fine when it comes to that standpoint, staying healthy. I think he's completely rebuilt himself, and I think he's set to have a monster season. Jarvis Landry, same thing, getting back, getting healthy, determined. Both of these guys want redemption. They both had high expectations. They both reached over 1,000 yards receiving, but their goals are much bigger than that. So they're motivated. Rashard Higgins is re-signed, and he will play. Rashard Higgins was Baker's blanket when it comes to being comfortable. Who's that guy we can consistently go to and count on? That was Rashard Higgins. Now you draft Donovan Peoples-Jones out of Michigan with your last pick in the draft, who I absolutely love. I love Donovan Peoples-Jones, 5-star wide receiver coming out of high school. Picked Michigan because it's his hometown school. Had terrible quarterback play, bad coaching, in my opinion, and he's shown a lot of signs of potential, a lot of flashes of greatness. But as far as consistency, you haven't really seen it because the quarterback play, the bad coaching, from a game plan standpoint, it was rough. So I think you're getting a big ball of talent with him, and I think Chad O'Shea, OBJ, Jarvis Landry can help him transition and mold him and do what Michigan couldn't do. And he's a different style. He's a big, more athletic, physical receiver compared to Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry, who are route runners, good run after the catch, or yards after the catch, same thing, whatever. He's going to bring something different. And I'm expecting him to shine. I think he can be a star. You look at the tight end room, David Njoku has requested a trade. The Browns would like to keep him, but if he stays, you're going to have Austin Hooper, who I believe will finish as a top 5 tight end in the league, David Njoku, and a guy who's got comparisons to George Kittle in Harrison Bryant. And don't count out Steven Carlson. who I thought was pretty good last year. Even though I think he went undrafted, I thought he played very well. So, Baker loves his tight ends. Stefanski loves using tight ends. I think it's perfect fit. Trying to think what else. Running backs, you get Kareem Hunt for an entire season. So you're going to use him out of the backfield passing and in the run game, giving Nick Chubb a break every once in a while. And speaking of Nick Chubb, the offense will run through Nick Chubb. You're going to limit Baker's passing, or limit his attempts. And what that's going to do in this system, it's going to put him in a position to where I don't think he's going to have to force it as much. I think his completion percentage is going to be through the roof compared to last season. And I think you're going to see that careful gambler come back. He's not going to be throwing into the triple coverage anymore. So you look at this season, and you can't help but say, you know what? We were wrong about last year. We were wrong about the offensive line. We were wrong about Freddie Kitchens. But I think last year there was a lot to learn from, and I think last year had to happen for the Browns to be successful. Baker is now mentally in a right place. He's not as focused with attacking his critics. He's very focused on getting better on the field, limiting the interceptions, being more efficient, getting back to what he's successful at. And that's why I think he's going to be very good this year. Last year I said potential MVP. That was, buying off of the hype. I'm not going to say that just because I think the style in the offense he'll be in, I think he'll be in the conversation. But I fully expect Baker Mayfield to get back to being Baker Mayfield. I have no doubt. That this is he's in the right position here. With the receiving core, the running backs, the tight ends, the offensive line fixed, and the style of play is back to his skill set. I have no doubt this is what Baker Mayfield needs. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I think Baker Mayfield will be successful. So, let's run back through that again. Offensive line. Hold on. All right. Coaching with the combination of Stefanski, Van Pelt, and Case Keenum. Offensive line, the new additions combined with a healthy J.C. Treader, some competition there at right guard. Tight ends, if Njoku stays, you got three. You have one young tight end with a lot of potential. You have a superstar tight end in Hooper, and you got an athletic tight end who's got a lot of potential in Njoku. Receiving core, Higgins will get back to being Higgins. OBJ is going to be OBJ again. I fully expect him to have a huge bounce back year, and Landry I think is going to keep being Landry, and I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is going to surprise a lot of people. Now it's going to be difficult with what's going on in the world as far as getting the guys in the building, coaching, getting these guys coached up, getting the system. So it might be a little rocky to begin with, but if Baker Mayfield doesn't succeed in this offense, he can't succeed in the NFL. And that's why I fully expect him to have a great season because, like I said, with all the additions, free agency, offseason, the coaching, himself personally, that's his biggest issue, I would say. Baker Mayfield needs to hold Baker Mayfield accountable and get back to being himself. I don't think people think of him as like a diva. I never thought he was this super crazy diva. But he's young, and the team's young. And when you don't have a leader from the coaching standpoint who can say, hey, no, get this together, it's hard. And, now I think we have that. The only way I can see Baker not succeeding is if there's a lot of injuries or Kevin Stefanski completely abandons what he's the best at. And I don't see that happening like what happened with Freddie Kitchens. And Freddie was dead set on maintaining the play calling position. Kevin Stefanski, if by week 2 the offense is not successful, he will very quickly give it up. So I really have no doubts, barring injury or other injuries to important positions, I think he'll be successful this season. I have no doubt he's the guy. He's special. He's a special player. Now, I'm not saying he's the greatest quarterback in the NFL. I'm not saying anything like that. But I'm saying people are writing him off based off of one bad year, acting like he's never been successful, and basically completely ignoring any success he's had, even in the past year. Like I said, you look at his numbers outside of play action last season compared to when they were in play action. Even in his bad year, it's vastly different. Vastly different. And Kevin Stefanski, to me, I think Baker's perfect offense should be about 70% play action. I'm talking from the passing game. I think it should be about 70% play action, the rest, shotgun with quick options to get the ball out, a lot of check downs, and a lot of scheming. That's one thing that Lincoln Riley does great. He puts his quarterbacks in the best position to succeed. That's why Baker had such a good college career. And you've seen that in his first season. So it's not like, I just made a video on Josh Rosen saying I still believe he can be successful. You haven't seen much success with Josh Rosen in the NFL for different reasons, but you've seen a high level of success with Baker Mayfield. Like I said, with the rookie touchdown record and whatnot. And that's not saying he was perfect, but it's there. You can clearly see it. Get that back for this season. I think he will. I don't think that there's literally one hole on this offense, and it's at right guard. And I think we have serviceable players there to fill that, compete, and whatnot. And potentially Chris Hubbard could, he's still on the team. He could potentially compete at that right guard position. And I think it's easier to play guard than tackle. I've played both. I'm not saying I've played against guys that good, but when you're playing tackle, you got to be more athletic. You got to be more quick. When you're playing guard, it's just kind of, I don't know. I'm not going to get into it. But my point is, Baker Mayfield will be successful this season because of everything I just said. And if he's not, then I have a lot of concerns. And I think this offense is I think he'll thrive in this offense. I think this is the perfect offense for Baker Mayfield to be in. Now, it might go a little too heavy run game, especially earlier on, adjusting into the season, with the lack of practices and whatnot. But I completely expect Baker to succeed. What level of success, I'm not going to say. Because, I'm not going to say MVP. I'm not going to say, I really don't want to get into what level of success. He will put up better numbers, stat-wise, than his rookie season. he will be a lot better this year than any year you've seen him. Baker Mayfield is a baller, and he's going to get back to being a baller this season. That's my prediction. If you've watched all the way through, I know this is kind of rambling, but I needed to explain myself. There's a lot of people who don't understand. They don't understand that Baker was throwing to a guy in Rashard Higgins who was his number one. Jarvis Landry, he struggled with Jarvis Landry his first season. But he and Rashard Higgins were, like that. And then Freddie completely threw that out the window. So people just act like Baker was this level and then he went down here. No, there's reasons for why his play decreased as much as it did outside of, Baker Mayfield sucks. I don't think he sucks. I think he had a terrible coach, terrible offensive line, young team, and I don't think he was disciplined. So, 46 minutes into this, I hope you at least understand, if you watched all the way through. I think if you take a step back, even if you don't think Baker's a good quarterback, look like what I said with Kirk Cousins. His numbers are pretty good. He led the league in play action or touchdowns off of play action because of Kevin Stefanski. Now, people will talk about is how much of it was Kevin Stefanski or how much of it was, I can't remember, Gary Kubiak. I think regardless of who it was, Stefanski's going to know how that success happened. If it was Kubiak, he was his right-hand man. He knows how that success happened. So I fully believe this year that Baker will be successful. The only concerns I really have with this team are defensively. I think we have some guys who are going to potentially step up and surprise a lot of people this year. So, if you disagree with me, that's fine. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. But I really do believe that he will be successful. So, let me know your thoughts. If you watched to the end, you're a great person. My throat hurts from talking a lot. I don't know if you can hear the change in voice, but it kind of hurts a little bit here. So, and I will be doing podcasts eventually. That's another thing. If you're listening and you're a Browns fan, I want to do a Cleveland Browns podcast at least like once a month until the season starts. Once the season starts, it'll be a little bit more consistent. But as far as like my current schedule, you're not going to see a whole lot of videos on this channel because of the podcast and stuff like that. If you didn't know already, me and my friend Dylan Lowe are doing the Kick Six podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Like I said earlier, I'll leave the link to that channel below. We're currently on episode 3. But, with my work schedule, with the podcast schedule, it's hard to work it in. But do I want to do it? Yes, I do. There's a lot of things I want to get into. Talking about Baker and how he can get back to that success. This is one of the things I wanted to talk about, and there's a lot of things I want to talk about. Like we're 50 minutes into this video. I still didn't even talk about Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt is one of the best running backs in the NFL. He slipped up, had a domestic violence issue. John Dorsey went out on a limb, signed him, and he played fantastic. He wasn't a typical running back out of the backfield, he was kind of used as a receiver. And, from everything I hear this season, he's going to get used as that again. He was a fullback, he was a receiver, running back. So he's kind of that Swiss Army knife, and there's nobody I would want better to be a Swiss Army knife. He's Kareem Hunt. And I know I said I didn't talk about it. I'm going to talk about him. Kareem Hunt is one of the best players in the NFL when he's at his best. You go back to his days in Kansas City, he was unstoppable. And I think he can get back to those days. Running the ball out of the backfield. So, on the podcast, me and Dylan were talking about this, and he basically said, this offense that Kevin Stefanski is going to run is going to be through Nick Chubb, which it should be. I'm fully supportive in that. Like I said, take the ball out of Baker's hands, lower his pass attempts, put him in better positions. But when Nick Chubb goes off the field, Kareem Hunt is, I wouldn't say just as good because I think Nick Chubb is better. Kareem Hunt is a beast. Like, we've completely forgot about how good Kareem Hunt is as a runner. Like, Kareem Hunt is one of the best players in football. And you're going to see him used many different ways this season, but just kind of like how Rashard Higgins was Baker's, his comfort guy, the guy he could look to and go to consistently. I think that's kind of what Kareem Hunt's going to be. You're going to see him used a lot in the screen game. You're going to see him a lot little dump-off passes. You're going to see him a lot when it comes to trick plays and counters. And, it's going to be interesting to see how they use him. And I think I might do a separate video on this because I don't know how many people are actually going to watch this video. But I think when you're talking about guys who will have the most impact on this season, you're going to obviously talk about your Nick Chubbs and your Odell Beckham Jr.'s and the Austin Hooper, the big new signings. Kareem Hunt is, I said he's a Swiss Army knife, but he's really an X factor. Like, I know that's a Madden term, but, Kareem Hunt is a guy who you can use him in every single way. And the Browns also went out and got, what's his name? The fullback from Denver. I can't remember his name. But anyway, so if Kareem Hunt doesn't have to play fullback as much because we've been committed to playing or using fullback or using a fullback, if Kareem Hunt doesn't have to play the fullback position like he did a lot last season, what's that going to open up for him? There was talks. Chad O'Shea was talking about potentially using Kareem Hunt as a third wide receiver. Everybody's talking about, is Hollywood going to get that third receiver role? Hollywood being Rashard Higgins. Is Donovan Peoples-Jones going to get that? I personally think if we had training camp, Donovan Peoples-Jones would get it. Because I think you're going to get him in camp and just see what all he can do. But, I really don't know how everything's going to work out and all. But, I won't be surprised if you hear, from training camps, if there is training camps, Donovan Peoples-Jones is shining. And I think you're going to see that see that a lot from the defensive side, with guys like Grant Delpit. I think you're going to see him really shine. I think you're going to see guys like Jacob Phillips really shine. But trying to get back on track, and I know we're running late, but I really do think like this is something special. This offense. You look at the Minnesota Vikings. Dalvin Cook was lighting it up. I had Dalvin Cook on my fantasy team. Dalvin Cook was fantastic. Fantastic. Consistent, too. Like, he was very consistent. And I don't know about you. I think Nick Chubb is maybe not way better, but Nick Chubb's better than Dalvin Cook. So if you've seen the success that Dalvin Cook had in this offense, Nick Chubb's going to have even more. You look at the San Francisco 49ers, they went running back by committee, but they had a lot of success based off of the play action zone run scheme. And, we don't just have one running back who can succeed in that style. We have two. And I like Dontrell Hilliard too. Like, Dontrell Hilliard is not a fancy name. He's not a Kareem Hunt or a Nick Chubb. But, when he had to last season, he was solid. Like, he wasn't great, but he was solid. He was serviceable. And, this is going to be a run-first scheme, passing off of the play-action majority. The majority of the passing game will be off that play action. So I think the run game is going to open it up so much for Baker to succeed. And that's what this video is. We're going about an hour here. That's how Baker will succeed. You don't put all the pressure on him. I don't love listening to a lot of the sports media shows like, your First Takes, your Undisputeds. I'll listen to them, but, I don't take them completely legitimate. And I take them as these are some guys who are very set on the rating standpoint. They're going to say things that are going to get people's attentions and emotional reaction. That's not saying they don't believe what they're talking about, but these guys, they're gonna just let it go, and that's one of the things that was repeatedly said. I'm losing my train of thought. Gosh dang it. What was I saying? I forget what I was saying. I completely forgot what I was saying. But anyway, on the sports media guys, they just say what's going to get them ratings. And, that's another thing. Everybody's talking about trade OBJ. OBJ doesn't want to be there. OBJ doesn't fit. He played hurt all last season. I don't know how legit this is, but he said coming to Cleveland, getting traded to Cleveland was the best thing that ever happened to him. That might just be lip service, but I don't think, I think he means it to a certain extent. So Baker didn't have a great year last year, but I do think there was a lot of positives to take from it. And, thank you to Freddie Kitchens for sucking. Thank you to John Dorsey for being so devoted to your ego, being so devoted to what you personally thought was best, because, when it came down to the end of the season, it was, they want to keep him, they want to keep Freddie Kitchens, and it was like, unless it's a complete train wreck in the end, we're going to keep him. And, I was talking with a lot of my Browns friends, and especially like on Instagram and stuff, and they were like, this is ridiculous. Like, how can this guy keep his job? Like, he's clearly sucked. But anyway, long story short, he blew it so bad to where even though they still wanted to keep him, they still fired him. And if they didn't fire him, we'd be looking at another bad year this season, more dysfunction, and, Baker might be out the door because he might not have had success in another season of Freddie Kitchens, and, they might have said boot to Freddie, boot to John, and boot to Baker too. Whereas now, like I said, Baker is in the best position to succeed, and I don't see any other explanation. Like, if he doesn't succeed now, I don't know what to tell you. So, all right, this went over an hour. Not surprised. There's a lot of rambling. So, all right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.